Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
As farmers, we've done so many things to improve the environment, to increase our food supply, to make our water safer. And I don't think we get a lot of credit for that as farmers. And our topic here during Farm Basics is pesticide container disposal. I just remember back 20, 30 years ago, driving around the country, I'd see a lot of old pesticide containers just sitting in trees and things like that. And for the most part, farmers are doing a great job now recycling those containers. And we use that recycled material for things like drainage tile that we're going to talk about later today. So it's really changed in the last 20 or 30 years, and I guess we just wanted to discuss that a little bit and why it's changed, how it's changed, and what is going on in farms today with pesticide containers.
One of the things that's interesting, Brian, is this last 12 months, the U.S. had some new regulations on farmers in terms of what kind of bulk tanks they could use. So every farmer had to change if they had the old style that didn't meet the new regulations. Well, they had to junk that tank and bring in a new one. Now, for a lot of guys, they got into the season, they went to pick up their product and said, oh man, I didn't hear about this new regulation, or I forgot about it, or whatever. So at that point, it was, wow, I've got all this farming I got to do. I'm just going to set that container off to the side of my shed or something for a little bit, and then I'll deal with it at the end of the season. Well, here we are at the end of the spray season, and a lot of farmers are now recycling those tanks. And when we think about the tanks that farmers are using, most of them are some form of plastic, and plastic can be safely recycled. So what farmers will do is typically triple rinse and make sure those jugs are completely clean.
Well, not typically. That's what they're required to do, is triple rinse the tanks first.
I just meant to say that sometimes you may have to do a little bit more if you've got some stuff that's stuck on the side of a jug or so forth. But it's really not that difficult to do. You can spray them out, clean them out, whatever, and then those jugs can be recycled. Now with the big bulk tanks, most of the recycling centers will require you to chop them up a little bit, so you may have to do some cutting to get them down into smaller chunks that the recycling facility can handle. Most of the drainage tile that we're putting in on our farm is made from recycled plastic, and the very best plastic they can find for the use of drainage tile, where it has to be strong, but it also has to be a little flexible, is pesticide containers. Yep. It's just ironic that when we've got one thing on the farm that, hey, you know what, we need to get rid of this thing in a safe and responsible manner, but here's another plastic we're going to bring on the farm, drainage tile. It's going to serve a useful purpose for maybe 60 or 80 years for us, and we can use that old plastic, bring it right back in a new form.
Yeah, it is a great thing with all these pesticide containers now being made out of plastic. When Darren and I were growing up, it was 5-gallon metal cans and 55-gallon metal drums. What are you going to do with them? You can't exactly recycle a 55-gallon metal drum real easily. So farmers would use them, they'd cut the tops off and use them for trash cans or things like that. But a lot of times, unfortunately, they'd just be sitting around for years. So we love the fact that it's gone to poly, we're able to recycle these containers, and there's a lot less environmental risk this way. We're keeping the environment safe, keeping our food and water supplies safe. And I guess I just feel good about it as a farmer, and this is one of the things that I say, you know, we don't get a lot of credit for as farmers. We've taken what was not necessarily a good thing with all those metal containers. Now it's plastic, it's being recycled, it's being used, and we don't have a lot of risk on the farm.
One last point, Brian, is that when we were growing up, we would handle a lot of small containers, and we still see this in a lot of the foreign countries, like down in Brazil where we were at, a lot of small containers that guys were having to deal with. Now in the U.S., most farmers are using bulk containers that they can reuse for 5 or 6 years. Yep. Well, now if you've got a 250-gallon shuttle, that's 100 jugs that you don't have, 100 2.5-gallon jugs you don't have to handle each year for 5 or 6 years.
Right, and it's a lot less plastic.
Yeah, 500 or 600 jugs that would have had to get recycled. Now just one tank can hold all that.
Well, once again, these pesticide containers are a lot different than what they used to be. We think it's a great thing. But one thing we don't think is real great is our Weed of the Week. We're going to tell you how to stop it on your farm coming up later in the show.